Hello, everyone. I'm Francis Seeley from Global Net 21 and MPhil Voices, and this is one of the many webinars we do. And today we're going to look at activism. Now, we've already done that. We've done a webinar with Zoe Cooper on her story of activism. And today she's actually joining us on the other side. She's going to help me with the questions. And we're going to interview Lia Dover today, who comes from Argentina and has been here for 40 years. Originally, we thought she was from Colombia, and we put that up, and that's a terrible mistake. But Lia is from Argentina, and we're going to talk to her about her journey from Argentina to being an activist in the UK. Anyhow, Lia, thank you for joining us. It's great that you're here.
Great pleasure.
And maybe you could start very, very briefly to tell us about your background in Argentina and why you came to the UK.
First of all, let me tell you that all Latin Americans consider that we are brothers and sisters, whether we are Colombians, Argentinians, Bolivians, so quite happy to be described as Colombian. I come from a time in Argentina when there was a military dictatorship. Certainly when I was a student, and like many other students at the time, I thought I had to change the world single-handed. Certainly there was a lot of student activity, which I joined. I was in a hunger strike, which got a lot of press attention, and this coincided with the time when government repression started to be more violent. So because of all that, I came to the United Kingdom initially for a year. Just, I innocently thought that everything would spill over and I'll be back home in a year. And here I am 40 odd years later, because the dictatorship continued for quite some time. And indeed, quite a few of the people that were with me in that hunger strike subsequently disappeared.
But when you came, I mean, you say lots of people disappeared. Was it an easy journey for you? Because I know in stories like The Beekeeper of Aleppo and America Dirt, people who come from South and Central America sometimes have an incredibly difficult and horrendous journey to go where they want to go. You came for a year first, so maybe it was easier for you.
I was very privileged because I was assisted by a program which in those days had the British Council. So it was a very easy passage, and I was received by a family in the outskirts of London where I could live, and I received a lot of support. So I was incredibly privileged, and I made my home here. I have British ancestry, so I spoke English already. So it was an easy landing, although of course, changing countries is always a challenge, but soon I felt at home, and I'm incredibly grateful to the United Kingdom.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So you only intending to stay for a year. So how quickly, how easy was it to settle in the UK, in London when you got here?
Well, as I say, I was very protected, cushioned, because I stayed with a family of teachers. I was given a job at a local school, and I was made very comfortable. So it was a bit like an adventure, really. I was very young, so it was great. Time passed, and things got worse in Argentina. So I wasn't able to return very soon. And of course, then I got involved into other things, and I got a job with Amnesty International, because obviously seeing what was happening in my country to my friends and my student friends and others, I was very interested. And then I stayed in Amnesty for 17 years.
Wow.
This became my home very much, married, had children, etc. So then England really did become my home. Through, yes.
So you kind of brought that kind of passion for human rights with you when you came over, And is that what kind of persuaded you to get a job with Amnesty? Was it that sort of striving to sort of look after people's basic rights? Yeah.
Definitely. This is what I somewhat naively had started to campaign on in my own home city. And then once I came here, and once things got, as I said, very violent in Argentina, of course, it was very much at the forefront of my mind, and I desperately wanted to do something about it. So a job with Amnesty was the right move for me, and I was very lucky to get it and to have a very, very rewarding career there for a long time.
You actually became campaign director there, didn't you? I mean, what did that involve?
That's correct. I became a campaign director. So I was directing 2 particular campaigns at one point. One does lots of things, but one was an international campaign against torture, and the other one against disappearances in certain countries. Then I moved on to be a researcher, and I became the researcher on specific countries and did a lot of field work as a researcher, which also was incredibly rewarding, because that's where you get a feel for the results, the little results that you get, which are so uplifting and so rewarding when you know one life has been saved, when you know, I don't know if I can relate this as a little moment, which I always remember. I was in a very tiny town in southern Chile, in a very remote area, doing a research trip. It was a small meeting in a church, and this man got up and said in a very humble voice, I was arrested and was being taken in a car blindfold by the secret police. And a call came through saying, so-and-so, take him back because there is an Amnesty International complaint.
Wow.
And the car turned round and he was taken into official custody, as opposed to being taken to some place where he would almost certainly have been tortured and possibly killed, because there was, of course, a place where secret detention centers were used quite commonly. So just this one story in which, this had been one of hundreds of persons that we have tried to help, but we got to know that this one person had been helped, and that was fantastic. That was fantastic. It gives you the energy to continue. And of course, there are many other cases in which one can't help. But it just gives you an enormous amount of energy and optimism and faith that it is possible to help.
So those stories, are what really tells people why it's worth doing those things, and that's really good. But you then also became a consultant, didn't you, to the United Nations? What did that involve?
I did that not for a long time, actually. I was just helping with some specific projects. The most significant project I was involved with had to do with education in Africa and other countries on AIDS, as part of the global AIDS prevention campaign. Because I was involved in human rights education, then the project encompassed education to prevent AIDS and preserve your right to life.
I see. So it sounds as though you had an extremely busy time and an incredibly active job, and then you decided that to become a solicitor. So you are hardly gonna.
Sounds terribly boring, doesn't it?
Well, no, I was just thinking it's not as though you weren't already achieving some, truly amazing things. Then you decided to challenge yourself even further and become a solicitor. Tell us about what kind of influenced that change.
Yes, it was interesting. There came a point at Amnesty where I felt that I had given my best, and that I needed to leave that space to somebody new and do something else myself. Of course, becoming a solicitor was for me a different way of doing the same in a different manner, but closer to home, because what I most enjoyed about my work at Amnesty was the interaction with people. And I wanted a job where that interaction was very much part of the daily work. I enjoyed that much more than the director jobs which I had at Amnesty, which were also wonderful, but involved less interaction. So I became a solicitor, and I worked only for legal aid, and mainly in cases of homelessness here in London, in different parts of London. I worked for law centres in Hackney and in Barnet, and a little bit in Haringey as well. And it was also very rewarding in a similar way. You know, oftentimes you just had to rack your brains and knock your head against the wall because you couldn't help them. But other times you could. And when you could solve the housing problem for somebody who'd been in the street or who had been living in terrible conditions, it's really wonderful, and it's joyful.
When you talk about being a solicitor, people often think, don't they, that it's boring, that you're going to be doing divorce work, going to be doing conveyancing and so on. And they don't understand very often that solicitors are also about human rights. And you chose that deliberately, didn't you? You didn't want to be any solicitor. You wanted a job that fitted in with your passion.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very glad that some people do other aspects of the law, but that is anything that would have been related to human rights is something that would have been right for me, and anything else would not have been about me at all. So I didn't make any money, but I was very happy.
That is the main thing, isn't it? How long were you a solicitor for?
About 10 years.
Yeah.
Because I was already in my early 40s when I trained.
Wow.
Yes.
And then, so you were a solicitor until you retired, technically retired, but you didn't really retire, did you? You haven't retired.
Until I retired, yes. Until I retired, yes.
So you and I met because of Extinction Rebellion. We met to go and deliver a Heading for Extinction talk. So I know you because of your environmental activities and campaigning. So can you tell us a little bit about what persuaded you to start to sort of stand up for the environment? What was the one thing that brought you to Extinction Rebellion, for example?
Yes, I've told this story a few times, and you have heard it before, Zoe. I think a lot of people of my generation feel that we had a relatively easy ride. We lived through a time of plenty to a considerable extent, but that we didn't pay sufficient attention to the mess that we were leaving for our future generations, our children, our grandchildren, and so on. So I feel that my generation has a special responsibility for the threat that we now have of a climate catastrophe. So I once went to an activity, an Extinction Rebellion activity, thinking, well, gosh, I'm going to see all these youngsters and I'm going to feel a little bit out of place, but I'll go anyway, and walked along. It was a very jolly activity, lawful, walking with music and so on. And there was a very elegant gentleman who was wearing a plaque that said, I am a rebel because I want to look my grandchildren in the eye. And it was this immediate understanding of where he was coming from, and identifying also with how I was feeling, that sparked the commitment to continue and to get more involved. And then I became friends with this particular gentleman who himself went on to do incredibly brave and wonderful things, like doing a 17-day hunger strike at some point, being in his 80s, I think. I can't remember now his age particularly. So there are many inspiring people in the movement, and I do a little bit here and a little bit there and try to spread the word, because I think I am a believer that things can change. I know sometimes it doesn't seem like it. I know sometimes it seems impossible, but things do change. Just think, the suffragettes succeeded. We no longer have legalized slavery. I know we have other forms of slavery, but we no longer have legalized slavery. And in terms of climate change, things are happening, and they are happening because people have united and people are asking for them. And there is an incredible jump in general awareness about what's going on. These subjects, which are now everyday subjects, weren't talked about hardly, except for very dedicated groups. They were not talked about by the general population 5-10 years ago, and now they're all over the place, which is great.
And can you tell us about any? Are there any particular campaigns that you've been interested in the kind of environmental arena? Is there one thing that particularly draws you, or is it just sort of all of it? You're trying to change all of it.
Well, I no longer think I can change the world on my own. That was when I was 17. But yes, I try to, when I do talks, etc. Obviously, I have broader objectives. I'm also a little bit involved with the grandparents group. We went to Buckingham Palace and read a letter to the Queen, appealed to her sense as a grandmother. Which was basically something that the media could pick up, that we were appealing to the Queen. But in our own area, all of you here present, and perhaps many more people now in Enfield are aware of the Edmonton incinerator. That has become an important project for me and for the people I work with. We feel it is an incongruous project at the time of climate catastrophe, and I'm sure you've had other people who have explained the reasons for that. But it is something about which I feel quite motivated. And you and I, Zoe, have carried a cardboard incinerator at one point to one place where we were doing leafleting. So we picked up a rather tatty incinerator and made it all beautiful and showed people what an incinerator is and what it does to our environment, which is appalling. And the reality is that not enough people are aware of what we have just around the corner.
So we're beginning to learn some of the secrets of you and Zoe now, which is really, really interesting, and what you've been up to. And you say now you're not 17 and you can't do everything, but it seems that you are doing everything. I mean, you also work for the Ark in St. John's. You're a volunteer there as well, aren't you?
Yeah. Yes. The Ark is a wonderful project in which I play the tiniest of roles. It's based at St. John's Church in Palmer's Green. It's the creation of absolutely amazing person, Reverend Julie Coleman, who runs an incredible operation and range of services for people who are needy in one way or another. One of them is a food bank on a Friday, which is where I help, as well as many other people who are helping throughout the week. And the number of, perhaps, many of us don't realize how much need there is in Enfield, just around the corner, especially as a result of COVID, but not only. and there are so many families that are struggling to make ends meet, okay, that have people who have lost family members, have lost livelihoods. There is domestic violence and all the consequences of that. There are families with one or more disabled people in them, and so on and so on. And she somehow manages to support and help everybody, and it's absolutely great, and I feel honored to be in a very, very small way part of that project.
And you didn't stop there as well, did you? You also decided that you would be chair of a residents association. I mean, why ever did you decide that you wanted to do that?
Sometimes ask that question myself, Francis. Well, this was a little bit of an accident, I have to say. You know, at some point after I retired, I thought I didn't know anybody. So because I was always working. So I decided to get involved with the Residents Association to connect with my area and with my neighbors and to contribute in what I could. So I have been there for a number of years, and more recently became the vice chair. And then unfortunately the chair left, and I was left completely in a completely unplanned manner with this role until the next AGM.
Yes, and I believe it's been quite a difficult time with the Residents Association, with the low traffic neighbourhood pros, and people for and people against. How have you coped, Lia? How has that been for you?
Yeah, it's a bit of a difficult subject at the moment. Yes, you're right. It has been a very difficult time because the very deep divisions, which are clear to everybody, that have occurred in our community as a result of the LTN schemes, they have become part of the workings of the association, of the committee in particular. And very sadly, in my view, and I have already said this publicly, so I feel free to say it again here, the elections for a new committee, which are to take place imminently, have become a bit of a competition between the two sides, the pro and the anti. And we have all seen in social media how that competition has become quite vitriolic, sometimes hostile, in a manner that is quite shocking, considering that there are so many bigger problems in our society and in our country, and certainly in the world. But this is the reality, the way it's gone, and we are now trying to see how we're going to go forward. Hopefully we'll find a way forward which is beneficial to everybody, and that doesn't involve any more hostilities.
It must have been a tremendous learning curve for you, because you've been involved in activism, you've been taking a cardboard incinerator around, you've been shouting on the sidelines. Suddenly you become chairman, and you've got to be a peacemaker, you've got to be a conciliator if you can be. That must have been a big change and a different form of activism for you.
Absolutely, it's a completely different role, and yes, I am very much trying to play that role, but it's very difficult because I'm trapped, if you like, or caught in between two very animated sides, let's put it that way. But hopefully things will develop in a manner that will allow for peaceful resolutions, and that the association will become again a peaceful place for the community to resolve its problems and to come together and to heal where things have been painful in one way or another. That's the aspiration.
I think, that would be wonderful, and I think if anyone can help to make that happen, that's you, Lia, because you've had such a wonderful career. And I was just wondering, as you were talking, what advice would you give to our young activists and climate change campaigners and people who are interested in building local communities and more caring systems? What would some words of wisdom be from you to them?
Well, I can't be sure that I have wisdom, but I have tried. And it seems to me that one of the main things to remember always is that, as I have said earlier, that if you persevere, there will be change. Maybe it will come much later than you expected, or smaller or larger, but there are surprises along the way. There are surprises along the way. And people come in, the more people come together, the more it's likely that change will happen. And this is why it's so, so important that more people become active, because especially my generation, where we have had such comfortable life, maybe we have a little bit of a tendency to say, oh, well, other people will do it. Other people will take this on. Other people will fight this battle. Other people will find a solution. It's us who have to find it. It's us to have to push for it. And that is a really important message for me. Also, that when there are differences, and this comes a little bit through my recent experience in my Residents Association, if there are disagreements, disagree on the ideas, on the concepts, and not on the individuals.
Well, that's really good advice. But there's another piece of advice you can give that you give an example of, and that is lots of people volunteer, get involved in things because they have a passion. Doesn't go the way they think and they drop out. They're there for a short period of time. What you've shown is that the long term is important. Persistence is very important. Would you say to people, don't expect short term gains. You're there for the long term.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And for those climate activists who have been doing this for decades, because now, in any neighborhood, you find a considerable number of people who are climate activists in one degree or another. But 30, 40 years ago, those people were fighting lonely fights and not being heard and not being listened to. But they persevered, and here we are. We have
and Zoe, when you met Lia, given all the experience she's had, did she give you inspiration for what you wanted to do?
Absolutely. We went to give a talk together, and we'd both rehearsed the talk, and we'd done the slides, and I gave my bit of the talk, and then Lia stood up, and she had such a wonderful, commanding but approachable, friendly presence. I was thinking, I must take notes now. I want to be able to deliver this talk. And what I loved is that you brought a very broad subject, climate change, biodiversity collapse is huge, but you brought it down to a local level. You introduced local issues and you had some solutions. So I think that everybody in the room, or whoever we were presenting to, came away feeling that they could make a difference. So they felt scared, sad, but they also felt empowered to go and do something. So thank you for that, Lia. That was
what a wonderful thing. What a wonderful compliment. All the time that we have been working together, Zoe, I have felt I couldn't do it without you. So there you go.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you.
Perfect double act.
There you are. You see, mutual admiration. So tell me, Lia, if anybody wanted to find out more about the causes you've been involved in, the work you do, and make contact with you, where would they go?
Well, that's a difficult question. They will have to email me, because at the moment I don't have just one institution that I'm associated with.
Okay, so we will try and make sure people get your email if you don't mind, if they ask for
I
it.
don't mind. I don't mind.
Oh, well, that's okay.
So long as they are friendly emails, of course.
Okay, we'll stipulate that it must be friendly emails.
Absolutely.
Okay? Yeah, all right. Okay, well, thank you for doing it, because we've come to the end of our 30 minutes now, which is great, and we're dead on time, and that's fantastic.
It's my pleasure.
So, thank you for doing it, because I think, your life, your persistence, different things you've done, coming from Argentina, making a new life here, it's sort of carrying on the passion that you had from childhood into adulthood right through your life is an inspiration to everyone, because it gives them the message that you've got to keep going. You can't stop. It doesn't happen all at once. You've got to be there for the long term. And I think that is a fantastic story to tell, and one that in your life you told it. So thank you for doing the interview. It's been really, really interesting.
Well, thank you for your very kind words.
Okay, well, thank you. And, we'll end this interview now.